The story revolves around playing cards possessing incredible power and the struggle between organizations to acquire them, as they have been scattered across 4 nations. It begins with a military ship at sea with an island in the middle of the ocean. The city built there is in chaos. The protective wall of the city is fiercely burning. Meanwhile, each member of the royal family has been evacuated to safety. The soldiers communicate with each other through a shared device, but suddenly, one of them becomes agitated because the intruder has not yet been found. Even more serious is that the intruder is carrying heavy equipment and explosives. In the basement, soldiers are chasing the intruder. This place holds a treasure that everyone desires to possess. A gunfight erupts, leaving several people fallen, but the intruder is still not hit. They must continue the pursuit to the south of the tower. Automatic lights turn on, forcing the intruder to finally stop in front of a large door. She kneels and places her suitcase down, making her pursuers think she is about to surrender. Then, she stands up straight with her hands raised. All the soldiers were surprised because she was too young. As soon as she finished speaking, hundreds of bombs appeared on the wall and automatically detonated. Black smoke covered a part of the tower, and the pursuing soldiers could only watch in disbelief. Airplanes flew in, firing a volley of bullets at the soldiers below. In a nearby building, another group was tensely observing everything happening. Meanwhile, below, a soldier operated 2 machine guns, firing directly at the helicopter hovering in the air. The girl who was on the helicopter suddenly used the power of the card, and a missile was launched, crashing directly into the castle and destroying everything. 2 soldiers below aimed their guns directly at the helicopter above. Before they could pull the trigger, they were distracted by something in the sky. Meanwhile, a subordinate reported that everything was ready, but the man stood still, giving no orders. The helicopter door swung open, and a strong wind blew in, causing the girl's suitcase to open, releasing a few cards. They began to glow and fly straight into the sky like stars, illuminating the entire land. That light spread everywhere. This place is the land of Sparta. A month later, the lives of the people had returned to normal. I was leaning against the railing of a park staircase, sipping a can of beer while observing everything in sight. I noticed a man standing in front of a coffee counter, wearing an expensive watch on his wrist, 2 young men with seemingly valuable phones in their back pockets, and an African boy crying because his dog had run astray in the busy street. I quickly took action after grasping everything. I walked over to the coffee counter and threw the beer can into the recycling bin, distracting both the counter owner and the man in the suit who was arguing. I walked past them and casually took a hot dog out of my pocket for the dog that had just run up and bitten the man's leg. I apologized to him and walked the dog away, mischievously letting it run around the 2 young men and finally giving it to the African boy. Somehow, the boy had a lollipop in his hand. I casually walked away after a successful theft because in my pocket was the Rolex watch of the man earlier. At the orphanage, 2 men were discussing rent. The landlord wanted to build a luxury apartment complex on this land if Lindsay continued to delay payment. If she wanted to extend and keep the land for the children, she needed to pay. Standing outside the door, I overheard all of this. The children here seemed very fond of me and invited me to play, but I refused, saying I was busy. I recalled the earlier conversation between the 2 men, reinforcing my determination. I went to a pawn shop with the expensive items I had stolen. Unfortunately, I had stolen a fake Rolex with a creaky mechanism from the stingy businessman, along with 2 old but expensive phones and other items. It seemed like a jackpot, but upon appraisal, it was worth nothing. The experienced shop owner knew at a glance that these were stolen goods. He never buys items of unclear origin. I stubbornly took off the shirt I was wearing, wanting to sell it to the shop owner because it belonged to the band Poison Phenomenon. I presented it as a super rare shirt I'd bought at a small gig, but the owner didn't buy it either, instead noticing the 2 of spades card in my pocket on the table. The shop owner wanted to buy it, but I didn't want to sell it. He didn't mind, thinking I would never be able to own the real thing and kicked me out. The mention of playing cards reminded me of a place. So I hitchhiked to Bell Casino. It was my first time here. Inside, it was truly luxurious and splendid. I sat down at a table, and after a few hands, I had the most chips at the table. The other players, tired of losing, left in frustration. As soon as they left, an old man approached and introduced himself as Lucky Lunchman, declaring that he would teach me a lesson. He not only won, but won continuously, and now all the chips on the table belonged to him. I left dejectedly, but encountered Lucky outside. The old man was still playing outside and offered to take me as his apprentice, but something held me back. Finally, the casino staff invited both of us into a VIP room for champagne. In this gambling establishment, cameras are everywhere, and winning easily and excessively will attract attention and can cause quite a bit of trouble. Lucky took me in as his younger brother and led me along. In reality, there was no VIP room in the warehouse area. They were brought here for a purpose. The manager suspected Lucky of cheating and wanted to search him, demanding he hand over the red glove. Indeed, that was his secret weapon. Lucky would not give it up easily. He simply clapped his hands together, causing the security guard who wanted to search him to become disoriented and fall straight out the open window. The manager, witnessing this, was terrified, but it was fine because he still had another security guard. This security guard, named Bobby, did not follow orders. Instead, he took out a playing card that transformed into his glove. Bobby approached and squeezed the manager's arm, severing it. Strangely, there was no bloody scene as imagined, only scattered marbles falling across the floor, astounding both men. Bobby stepped forward, wanting to take Lucky's card, but the manager pulled out a gun. Unfortunately, the power of the card was faster than the trigger. The manager's head was crushed by Bobby, turning into colorful marbles. Somehow, Bobby knew Lucky's family situation and threatened him with the lives of his 7-year-old child and pregnant wife. Finally, Lucky was forced to hand over his card. As soon as Bobby held the card, Chris appeared, threatening him with a gun and trying to snatch the 10 of diamonds that Bobby had taken from Lucky. Both plunged into an evenly matched fight, but Chris seemed to have a slight edge. He also possessed a Jack of Clubs card. Lucky tried to escape, but he slipped on the marbles on the floor and fell directly into Bobby's gun. He should have survived, but due to his greed to get his card back from Bobby, he was crushed by him. Bobby also took one of the marbles, which was the remains of Lucky, to confront Chris. I sat there stunned until Chris told me to run, but unfortunately, I also slipped and fell into Bobby, conveniently snatching the card from his hand. By the time Bobby realized it, I had fled the hotel in a car I got from a newly arrived guest. Bobby chased me in a red sports car right behind me. It was a thrilling car chase through the streets. Chris also took a blue car and joined the pursuit. When they reached the middle of a deserted bridge, all 3 cars collided and exploded. The first person to get out was me. Chris also got out with an injured leg, limping. He wanted to get back the card I had stolen earlier, but then his sworn enemy appeared and shot Chris, causing him to fall instantly. Bobby appeared from behind and threatened me to hand over the card, promising me a quick death if I complied. If I resisted, Bobby would show me what hell was. At this point, I used my card, which transformed into a revolver. I used my concentration ability to aim precisely at Bobby and gave him a bullet to the chest. When the battle was over, Chris regained consciousness. Not only was he not dead, but he also had no wounds on his body. Both wanted to keep their cards, so they aimed their guns at each other. Chris came closer and took the gun from my hand. He urged me to pull the trigger, but I didn't have the courage. Just then, an antique car sped up, shooting out green vines that wrapped around me. I was then tied up and taken to Chris's headquarters. All members were present. Bernard made me a cup of tea, while VJ carefully untied me, but I didn't drink it right away, instead looking around at everyone present. I was extremely surprised when Bernard called me by my correct name. Even more surprising was that they not only knew my name, but also my habits, preferences, and even moles and birthmarks on my body, including those of my parents. At this moment, Chris walked in with my 2 of spades card. I was eager to get it back, but then a gun was pointed at my mouth. Just then, a phone rang. Bernard answered and received orders from his superiors. Afterward, he came out and told me about their mission and identities. The cards all possess special powers, and only those chosen by the cards can use their power. They are called special card players. A card player can only use the power of 1 card. Bernard opened a map on the TV to show me the countries where the cards were appearing. Currently, there are 4 countries: Spatata, Logan, Siphium, and Pelostic. The worrying thing is that there are players who abuse the power of the cards, causing chaos in their countries. Therefore, King Julius Foreign ordered them to secretly collect all the cards. The reason Bernard told me everything was because he was going to hire me to work here. After that, Bernard took me to a branch of Pinochle, a place that produces vintage cars for high-end customers. Bernard gave me a tour around. This place functions as a sales department of the company, with each member having different positions. At this moment, my hands couldn't stay still, and I inadvertently picked up a magazine from the table. As soon as I put it down, the magazine retracted, revealing a cabinet. Inside were weapons, which startled me. Bernard explained that they were allowed to use extra legal measures to retrieve the cards. They received direct orders from the king, so they always prioritize resolving issues in the most peaceful way possible. But I still hadn't made a decision because Bernard should at least give me a reason. He explained that the person I shot yesterday was a member of the notorious Klondike Gang, which is also the organization with the widest network and largest scale in the country. Importantly, their targets are the cards, so they can easily track me down. If I want to protect my card and earn a lot of money, I can only work here. Initially, I hesitated, but when Bernard mentioned the salary, my eyes lit up, and I immediately agreed. Bernard smiled kindly and explained the basic rules of the organization to me before returning my card. My cover job for the public was a sales intern. Then, he assigned the newcomer to Chris for training. Because the first rule of the job was to act courteously, Chris took me to get a suit tailored. After the tailor finished designing, they both went out for dessert, but I had to eat dog food. In reality, Chris was having dinner with a beautiful woman and speaking sweet nothings, leaving me to drink water alone. A tattooed man at the opposite table was bullying a waiter for accidentally spilling cake on him. Although the waiter apologized sincerely, the tattooed man refused to let it go. I was about to intervene when the tattooed man raised his fist, but Chris appeared, blocked the punch, and pinned the tattooed man to the table, making him beg for forgiveness. The waiter warmly thanked me, but I refused the credit, saying it was thanks to Chris. When I turned back, Chris was already embracing the beautiful woman. Afterward, I returned to the orphanage to tell Lindsay about the new job, the high salary, and, of course, that I would save this orphanage. Then, I returned to my old dilapidated house to sleep until the next day. It wasn't even dawn yet. The blaring car horns outside forced me to wake up early. Downstairs, Chris was waiting with the company's distinctive vintage car. As soon as I got in the car, I saw a woman's necklace. I guessed that the philandering Chris had done something in the car, and you know what that is. Chris sped through the busy streets to pursue their target. In this first mission, an intern like me should just watch and learn. But I didn't want to be useless, so I used my card. The man in the target car suddenly jumped onto Chris's car roof. He was the waiter we met yesterday. Robert's body was as hard as iron and no bullet could pierce it. The damage was almost zero. Police cars were also chasing Robert, but they did not intervene in the fight between the two sides. According to Chief Greg Young, only strange people can deal with people like this. In this confrontation, I stubbornly used my gun despite knowing it would cause no damage. Unfortunately, the most formidable enemies on this earth are not those with iron bodies like him, but those with power and an unparalleled mind. Chris took advantage of the moment Robert climbed onto the car roof and reached into the window to grab his throat, driving the car straight into the river because he had found Robert's weakness. Indeed, once in the water, Robert's card was neutralized because the water pressure at the bottom of the lake prevented Chris from opening the car door above. I also saw the car. I aimed precisely at the window and shot so that Chris could break the door and swim up. I jumped down, pulled Robert out, and handed him over to the police. Robert was a street thug who had luckily picked up a powerful card. He was deeply in debt, so he was manipulated into becoming a robber. This made me reflect on the saying repeatedly mentioned by Bernard and Lindsay: "Our choices define who we are." When I entered the room, I met Chris again. The good news was that Chris praised my excellent shooting skills. The bad news was that the two of spades was the weakest skill card among them. Bernard received a call from his superior instructing that if I didn't perform well, they should fire me immediately. But Bernard believed that I would be a positive asset to the team. This red-haired woman also possessed a card with firepower. She and two others were standing before a blazing fire in the night, praying as if in a religious ceremony. I went to the store where I had ordered a yellow suit and put it on immediately. Here, I accidentally stumbled upon a kidnapping. Without much thought, I immediately grabbed a nearby motorcycle and chased after the car. In the car, the Carter brothers were threatening Leo, who didn't even seem to care. The kidnappers were more worried than their victim. They wanted Leo to call his rich father for $10 million in ransom, but they didn't expect Leo not to even have his father's phone number. At this moment, they felt something was wrong. Looking back, they saw me chasing them on the motorcycle. I used my card, which transformed into a gun, and shot the car's tire, causing it to crash into a fire hydrant, spraying water everywhere like rain. The two men in the car stuck their heads out, while I grabbed Leo's hand and led him into a nearby store. Leo didn't appreciate my rude behavior because I had acted too hastily. Furthermore, I had also caused damage to the city. As soon as he finished speaking, the Carter brothers rushed in, demanding that Leo pay $10 million. No longer a kidnapping, they considered it compensation. Their small family factory had suffered losses when Leo's father's company proposed a project, but then canceled it without notice. Leo considered this normal, for isn't it the law of nature that big fish eat small fish? He didn't want to be involved in the grudges of the poor, showing disdain until the very end. Initially, I felt a little sympathetic and didn't want to get involved, but the two brothers preferred to communicate with their fists, so all three plunged into a chaotic brawl. Then, the police arrived and took everyone to the station for questioning, including charges of kidnapping and property damage. Even at the police station, Leo continued to preach his principles. Someone like me, who likes a wandering lifestyle, didn't understand and didn't want to understand. I thought Leo was dictatorial and that living like this would earn him no respect, whether old or young. Somehow, this comment spread to Leo's father as well. At this moment, Leo stood up and walked out with the police at the door, who didn't even stop him. I sneaked out to follow Leo. The female inspector wanted to stop them, but Police Chief Greg Young remained calm, telling her that if she didn't want to see tomorrow's sun, then she should go ahead and arrest them. Meanwhile, the Carter brothers were detained and did not have such privileges. It didn't matter anyway, because the leader of the cult group, Nick, appeared and rescued them by setting the police station on fire. On the other side, Leo and I were still walking together when I suddenly disappeared. A moment later, I returned with 2 hot dogs in my hands. I treated Leo to this meal as an apology for what happened at the police station earlier, so they both sat on the steps and ate together. There was nothing special about it, but in the world of the wealthy, like Leo, this was something new. I talked about my childhood, but Leo just saw it as an attempt to gain sympathy and forgiveness for my mistakes. My childhood wasn't stable either, but everything became a blur when I had an accident and lost my memory. Even memories of my family were gone. What remained with me was the orphanage that had sheltered me until I grew up. After finishing eating, they both went home, and I suggested taking the subway. Leo found this very new. In fact, he had never traveled by this means before. A child accidentally ran past and spilled ice cream on my newly bought suit. While I angrily scolded the child, Leo calmly sat down and treated the child gently. This aspect of him surprised me. When they arrived at the station, they met Nick and the Carter brothers. She used the power of her card to set the train on fire, causing everyone to panic and flee. The objective remained unchanged. They still wanted compensation. The flames grew larger when Nick heard Leo say that his father was willing to eliminate all threats, including his own son. Initially, Leo didn't want to compromise, but seeing me struggling to breathe because of the large flame, he agreed to go with them. Both were taken to an abandoned factory, where they witnessed 3 people praying with their crazy beliefs. It was then that they remembered my presence, but no one knew who I was. The 2 men began to guess that I didn't look like a student from a school for the wealthy. They even said I looked cowardly. Human endurance has its limits, so I took out my card to deal with them, turned it into a gun and aimed straight at the red-haired owner, continuously pulling the trigger. But her flames were stronger and completely burned my bullets. Then, she continuously shot fire at me, making it difficult for me to dodge. Just as the situation became critical, Chris drove up. He followed Leo's orders and brought 1 million yen in cash. As soon as the Carter brothers saw the money, their eyes lit up. This was also when Leo revealed his trump card. He also possessed a card and was a member of the group. He kicked the suitcase of money into the air like fireworks and turned it into a cannon. Indeed, when the wealthy gain power, they have to impress others. With just 1 shot, he took down Nick. They took the opportunity to confiscate her card. As Leo stepped out, the pillar of fire collapsed. Fortunately, I ran to save him in time. They all returned to the company where Bernard revealed Leo's identity. Besides his extremely wealthy family background, he was also the manager of Pinnacle's Old Maid Street branch. The most surprised was me, because I had just joined and treated Leo as an equal, while this kid was actually my boss. As a result, both Chris and I were taught a lesson by Leo. Wendy's childhood was spent in the arms of her father, a famous samurai. Therefore, she was exposed to swordsmanship from a young age. He taught her many things, especially about the Ace of Spades card. Every time she drew her sword, another personality of hers emerged. The alarm bell brought Wendy back to reality in her messy room. She hastily changed her clothes and went to work, not forgetting to bring her card. On the way to the company, she encountered some problems, but still arrived late. She focused on her work, completely unaware that I had stolen a client from Chris. By the time work ended, it was dark, so they all went to a beer pub, but only Wendy sat at a separate table. She was heartbroken and drinking glass after glass. 3 colleagues sat sipping beer and snacks, chatting about the day's work. The owner knew them. To welcome the new person, Me, the owner, treated everyone to beer today. It was late, but only Chris hadn't arrived yet because he was known for being late in the group. The group was listening to Leo remind me of the group's rules when Chris arrived. He didn't forget to remind me of rule number 1, never let Wendy draw her sword. She sat at the next table, adamantly stating that she would never draw her sword again. Seeing Wendy in a bad mood today, drinking beer like water, they all made excuses to leave, leaving only Chris and me. We were stuck with this burden. On the way back, we listened to Wendy talk about many aspects of her life. She remembered her father and his teachings. When she woke up, it was already the next morning. Learning from yesterday, she went to work 30 minutes early, and traffic was much more convenient. As soon as she sat down, the clock struck 9. Meanwhile, everyone was busy with work. I was test driving with yesterday's client while Bernard received a call from the chairman. They were informed that a bank robbery was taking place in the city. Chris had not yet arrived at the company. VJ was also busy because he would soon be assisting Chris. Only Wendy remained in the office, ready to receive support orders from them. On the other side, Chris was talking to the bank robbers. He had called Wendy, and she heard the entire conversation. The robbers were all armed, and to help everyone escape, he used his body to shield against bullets. Chris reported the situation to Wendy and VJ. Initially, only VJ went, but Wendy didn't want to be left behind and insisted on going. So they both went. While rushing to a green light intersection with a client on a test drive, I noticed Chris driving, chasing the robbers ahead. Realizing Chris was on duty, I feigned a stomachache and needing to go to the restroom, then quickly followed. Each drove a car to catch the bank robbers fleeing with hostages. A classic car chase unfolded on the streets. Just as the robbers thought they had escaped, VJ used his power to make vines grow from tree trunks blocking their path. At this moment, Wendy's car also caught up. She wielded her sword skillfully, but didn't draw it from its scabbard, only using the sheathed sword to injure a few robbers, while VJ rescued the hostages. Surprisingly, the robbers were not the card holders, but the hostage was. He stabbed VJ and introduced himself as John, the holder of the 4 of Hearts card. Many duplicates grew from his body. No matter how many Wendy defeated, they kept appearing. He kept duplicating, reminding her of her father's warning. Cornered, Wendy decided to draw her sword and slash down all the duplicates in front of her. VJ thought she had controlled her power, but that wasn't the case. She had appeared with Wendy's second personality. This was when the real problem arose. VJ took this opportunity to send an urgent message to Chris. Now, no matter how many duplicates there were, Love B handled them all. She even intended to slash the original. But fortunately, VJ stopped her. Her insane personality wanted to slash anyone in sight. She was always in fighting mode with the whole world. Enemies were fine, but if she encountered allies, chaos would ensue. Somehow, Leo also heard that Wendy had drawn her sword. He immediately flew a helicopter there and dropped the central bank's largest vault to contain her. No one thought Love B would escape, but what you least expect often happens. Love B slashed through the vault and even jumped up to slash Leo's helicopter. Fortunately, the pilot and Leo managed to jump out in time. VJ quickly threw a net to save both of them. Love B landed in the same spot and was about to raise her sword to satisfy her urge to fight when Chris appeared. She redirected and turned to slash him because she knew Chris was a tamed Sajiri, something samurai used for cutting practice. However, Chris was a bit different because he could heal himself even when stabbed through. He didn't die. Although still feeling pain, Love B knew this. So every time she appeared, she used Chris for cutting practice. A madwoman like her must have loved that feeling. But Love B didn't know that the team had a new member, me. My card might not be stronger than others, but my aiming skill was top-notch. I fired 3 shots that didn't harm Wendy's body, but knocked the sword out of Love B's hand. I knew that only when she didn't have the sword would everything return to normal. Wendy recalled her father once hoped she wouldn't follow the same path as him. A path where only loneliness accompanied her, but she wanted to become the person he wished her to be and believed she would truly succeed. Wendy rubbed her tear-filled eyes. The first person she saw was me, and that warm person was indeed me. I advised her with my optimistic mind, giving Wendy many different perspectives. After saying that, I said goodbye to her and left. The mission ended in the evening, but my client was still waiting at the intersection. News of yesterday's bank robbery quickly reached the female police officer, Chelsea. A rookie at the police station was assigned to investigate this case. Staff provided information about the man who arrived yesterday, Chris. Everyone usually saw him in a red suit, flirting with girls. Indeed, good news travels fast. Chelsea quickly went to the police station to report to Greg Young, but no one cared and advised her not to get involved. She intended to search for information about cases related to these people on the computer, but everything had been deleted. Chelsea couldn't understand why cases were overlooked when penal employees were involved. This further convinced her that there had to be a hidden story behind it. With her curious and especially stubborn personality, Chelsea ignored her colleagues' advice and was determined to investigate thoroughly. John had been arrested in the most recent case. Captain Greg Young assigned this interrogation to Chelsea. The man was restless and anxious, fearing he could die at any moment. He promised Chelsea to reveal everything about his family if she could guarantee his safety. Chelsea confidently promised John that she would ensure his survival and issued a witness protection order to her colleagues. But John himself, as a family member, knew he couldn't survive. So how could an outsider like Chelsea be sure he could survive? Meanwhile, Captain Greg Young was in his car talking on the phone. He wanted to know what happened a month ago in Folland, but would the chairman ever reveal it? The man just reminded the old police chief to know his limits, then hung up. Afterward, Greg Young and his subordinate Chelsea came to observe the situation at Pinnacle Company. She reported all the daily activities of the employees there. After watching them for a while, Greg Young attended the board's party and coincidentally met Bobby. This is Bobby, who confronted me and Chris. He didn't die and is currently working as a security guard outside the party for his boss. Greg Young taunted him, saying it was humiliating to be defeated by an amateur. Bobby was about to rush and hit him, but was stopped by a colleague next to him. The thought that some unknown nobody could hurt him was enough to drive him mad. The party inside was incredibly luxurious. All the guests looked very elegant and classy. They were all at the top of the food chain, from financial moguls to musicians. An experienced person like Greg Young could tell at a glance that they were involved in the military industry. After allowing the guests to dine for a while, the main character appeared, looking no different from a real mafia boss. Meanwhile, I had just finished work and was going home when I saw a shadow dart past. I immediately drew my gun and gave chase, only to come face to face with Chelsea, who presented her police badge. So I was handcuffed and taken to the car. At this time at the party, the surrounding lights went out, leaving only the stage lights shining on where Ban was standing. He stood there preaching about all sorts of life principles. Although there were some impolite remarks here, whoever had more assets had the right to speak. Ban was definitely the leader here. He introduced Mr. Morris, a justice minister, and even commented on his bald head. Although it was just a playful act, it was warmly received by the guests. Everyone laughed happily. While the speech was still ongoing, his subordinate went up and whispered something in his ear. Then, a man was brought up by two of Ban's bodyguards, his head covered. When the cloth was removed, it was John. Somehow, he had captured John from the detention center and rendered the police immunity badge useless against his power. John's crime was losing his card to someone else. Back to me, I was handcuffed by Chelsea and taken to the police car. After driving for quite a distance, they crashed into a school bus, causing their car to overturn in the middle of a deserted road. It was already midnight. Fortunately, it didn't explode, and there were no casualties. The bus flew over their heads. Luckily, both managed to escape just before the bus crashed down. But John ran out of luck. Ban broke his neck, not quickly, but slowly. Breaking bones this way is more painful than doing it decisively once. Chelsea and I had just recovered from the car fire when another disaster struck. A strange woman walked up and called me Pinoccle's puppy. I used my card to threaten her, almost pulling the trigger, but I couldn't make her stop. She even manipulated nearby objects to block bullets for herself. She also seemed to possess the power of a card, as she used telekinesis to choke Chelsea, then controlled my hand, pointing the gun at the policewoman like a puppet show. The bullet flew out as I pulled the trigger under the woman's control. At Ban's party, the atmosphere was incredibly tense. The guests were witnessing John's bones being broken piece by piece before their eyes. His neck was twisted to the limit a human body could endure. Blood gushed out like a fountain. While Ban remained calm in the face of this horrific scene, the guests were pale and speechless. Perhaps this was one of the ways he consolidated his absolute power. The result of the previous shooting was that no one was killed. Indeed, kindness is precious, but the kindness of the weak is foolish. For example, Chelsea, a rookie officer at the police department, dreams of finding justice and is ready to confront a major case involving many powerful forces behind it. This time, my bullet might have missed, but you can't escape forever. This is just a warning. The woman herself said that if she had a gun pointed at her head, Chelsea would have met the king of hell by now. After the party ended, Greg Young stood outside waiting for Ban. intending to ask about the attack at Champler Palace a month ago. It was because of that event that more people came to possess special power cards, causing no small amount of trouble. Old Man Bance simply asserted that he knew nothing. Although Greg Young pleaded, he still said no, and even advised him not to believe Theodore's words. "Don't doubt, lest you be surprised," he said, then left without looking back. Chelsea regained consciousness after receiving a lesson she would never forget. But for someone as stubborn as her, it's not certain if this lesson would truly sink in. It was truly a waste of time with someone like Chelsea. She confided in me that she had been curious since she was little. Moreover, she couldn't ignore what was happening before her eyes. It made her lose sleep, and curiosity ran in her blood. Therefore, there was no way Chelsea would stop the investigation here. I wasted my breath advising her. But if she wouldn't listen, then so be it. I handcuffed her to the burnt car, told her to calm down first, then left. The next morning, Chelsea drove Greg Young to observe the situation at Pinochle Company. They parked outside for a while, then returned to headquarters. She told him about herself as a child, how curious she was when she once found a typo in a newspaper and sent a letter to the editorial board. Finally, she was rewarded with a pencil. Now that she's grown up, she's about to be rewarded with candy. But it was copper candy, a euphemism for bullets. Greg Young told her about John, the man she was once in charge of investigating. His body was found by the river this morning. Chelsea heard this and broke out in a cold sweat. At Team J's meeting place, everyone was present, but no one mourned his passing. Many years ago, specifically when Champler was divided into 4 regions, demon soldiers came from the sea to conquer the island. Appearing with them were a sorcerer and a boy who made a proclamation to the people. This boy was the king of Champler, and if they wanted to save the island, they had to choose 13 knights from the 4 regions to stand by him. Thus, an army of 52 knights was formed from the 4 regions to save the island. The sorcerer also gave each of the 52 knights a card from a 52 card deck to show their loyalty to the boy. The knights swore by their blood and began fighting to regain freedom for their land. Although much blood was shed, they could not succeed. They turned to using the sorcerer's cards. All were given to the boy. The battle continued, and they were victorious, uniting the 4 regions, and he became the first king, according to what was recorded in the book found by archaeologists. Today, the artifacts being brought out are all from this kingdom, and specifically, the card is also being brought to an auction on the ship Queen Black Lady. In some room, Norman, CEO of Who, was giving an interview with an unbelievably ridiculous attitude. I'm about to go crazy because I'm severely seasick. Everyone was discussing those around this Norman, especially Briss and Brandy. These 2 also possessed cards. Their mission today was to trick everyone to steal the card being auctioned. Then, Leo came and told me that there was nothing wrong with this. They weren't thieves. They were just confiscating the cards from outsiders to return them to the royalty, and this was completely legal. Leo looked at me with a pale face, holding a bucket to vomit. My condition seemed quite serious with seasickness. At this point, Leo thought they needed to change the plan, but I still wanted to participate. Leo immediately refused this mission, demanding that they be careful with every step. One mistake could lead to disaster. In the worst-case scenario, they could be charged with criminal offenses. They couldn't let my vomit affect the whole team. Chris stood up and vouched for me, promising that I could do it. Although Leo objected, he still had to give in to Chris's determination, so they began to act according to the plan. While the auction was taking place on stage, backstage, they were executing their theft plot. I, with my skillful hands, disguised myself as a backstage staff member to approach the supervisor and steal the keys from him. Just a seemingly accidental collision helped me easily get what I wanted. Then, I went outside, caused a mess, and conveniently threw the keys to VJ, who was disguised as a waiter. He put the keys in a glass of water and handed it to Wendy, who was pretending to be a guest on the cruise. She jumped downstairs, deliberately, accidentally bumping into a security guard on the ship, causing the keys to fall out. She also asked him to come to her room to clean up and change quickly. Chris was there to retrieve the keys. While VJ was working in the kitchen, using the power of the blue card through the pipes, he secretly took the security card from the pocket of the man Wendy had bumped into earlier. They used devices to exchange information with each other. VJ still needed more time and asked Wendy to help him stall. The security guard had just finished showering and changing, and she brought out wine to invite him for a drink. Initially, he intended to refuse, but how could he resist the charm of a beautiful woman? Thanks to this, VJ managed to obtain the security card. Meanwhile, Chris had arrived at the room where the card was stored. He stood still with both hands raised for a moment, waiting for VJ to send the card through the pipe. After obtaining the card, he went to another room. Chris carefully disabled the camera before taking action. At the auction, BJ, disguised as a waiter, brought water to Leo, which was actually a progress report on the mission. Hearing the unexpected results, Leo was restless, reluctantly forced to sit still. Chris had not yet swapped the card. When Briss appeared, he electrocuted him, paralyzing his entire body. 1 million volts would normally turn a person into burnt pork, but immortal Chris was different. Leo's communication device also broke due to the electricity, making him even more panicked. He called Wendy, but she was drunk with the security guard in the room. I'm still fine, just severely seasick. I still managed to crawl to Chris's location to check on the auction situation. Norman kicked out the auctioneer and took the stage himself. Leo, normally very calm, could no longer sit still and began to bid against him. The battle between Chris and Briss now included me, but because I was severely seasick, I was subdued by Briss and became a hostage to threaten Chris. Chris feigned surrender and kicked away the cabinet containing the real card. I risked my life chasing after it and accidentally pushed the cabinet onto the main stage. In the middle of the auction, I fell on Leo, preventing him from shouting bids to compete for the card. And even though Norman won the auction, it was useless. The woman who had previously threatened Chelsea had stolen the card. She arrived by helicopter, then used her power to make the cabinet fly up, successfully retrieving the card. This mission failed. The next day, the media reported on the auction. The high card team happily chatted about this. Everyone makes mistakes, so no one can blame anyone. The most pitiful person in this story was Norman. He lost both money and the item, and he was angry because no newspaper mentioned him, even though he bid many times higher than others. Norman demanded his assistant find him an exclusive interview and asked newspapers to report extensively on him. But Briss had taken leave to take his child to school. Norman was determined to defeat Leo next time, so he was happy and no longer thought about the past. Chelsea was a hot girl live streaming and chatting with people on her way home. Suddenly, a voice rang out. Chris was standing there using his outdated flirting techniques, but Chelsea found it very funny and said she wasn't interested in players. As she turned to leave, I approached, accidentally touching her waist, which startled her, and she sprayed pepper spray into my eyes. Seeing that the two seemed close, Chelsea used her love card as a reward to bind their hands together, so neither of them could leave the other. They went to a pub and told VJ not to mention this to Wendy and Leo, or they would be laughed at. The bar owner, seeing the close relationship between them, even gave them an ice cream. Chris was angry because he had a date this weekend, so he was determined to find that girl to disable this power. VJ helped them find information about the girl. After finishing their ice cream, they eagerly ran off to find Chelsea. She was at the pool with friends attending a party. Both quickly appeared. Now what? Chelsea still didn't want to disable this power. Chris thought about cutting off his arm. After all, he was immortal and could heal wounds, but this still couldn't separate them. The only way was to find Chelsea. All three met everywhere to the point that she misunderstood them as stalkers, but she knew exactly what they wanted from her. As a result, they ran around the city for 3 days without eating or sleeping. They didn't expect Chelsea to have such an active lifestyle. Both sat down to rest in the park. Here they accidentally met Apple, a client of the company I worked for. He saw them holding hands and misunderstood it as a homosexual relationship. Before they could explain, Chris dragged me away to continue looking for Chelsea, but there was no way she would easily disable the card's power. Chris still wouldn't give up, wanting to separate from me at all costs. I was very tired and didn't want to keep running like this. Finally, both came to my house. We quickly ate canned food and went to sleep. I had a nightmare. For years, I often dreamed of a night when someone swung a sword in front of me. Around me was a sea of fire. Chris couldn't sleep either, probably because the pillow felt strange. Doctors once said it was psychological trauma or possibly due to an accident. Chris checked his messages. He knew he couldn't avoid this, so he could only text me not to reveal his date tomorrow to anyone. Even in the high card group, I agreed. I didn't think too much of it, guessing it was just a normal date. The next morning, both went to the meeting point to meet the girl from before. I didn't see anything unusual until Chris greeted the girl. Her name was Misson, and she was his younger sister. Definitely not a date. Chris introduced me to Misson as his colleague. After exchanging greetings, the three of us walked around the city together. I learned a lot about Chris from Misson. They went into different stores. Chris doted on his sister wholeheartedly, making her feel like a princess. They shopped together and then ate ice cream at a roadside stall. All three chatted about many things. Misson wondered what her brother was like at work, which made Chris signal to me. I cooperated, saying all sorts of good things about Chris at work, such as how kind and warm he was, always making colleagues trust him, a typical good person. Missyn was so happy she jumped up and down. Afterwards, all three went to a bakery for sweets. While Missyn was in the restroom, the two stayed and talked. Chris confided that he had never told his sister about the high card group, so she never knew what his brother did for a living. Unfortunately, they accidentally met Chelsea at the bakery, who mocked Chris for playing his role so well. From a player chasing girls like a hunter after prey, he now played the role of a good older brother. When Missyn returned, they greeted each other. I introduced Chelsea as their friend, and despite her reluctance, she cooperated with both of them. After eating, they walked for a while, and Chelsea tried every way to show Missyn her brother's true colors. She started saying all sorts of things to expose him. But Chris calmly told his sister that she was just looking for her destiny and said that I was the one she liked. Finally, Chelsea was distracted when Missyn dragged her to play. They were still playing on the beach when Chelsea realized she had been tricked. But at this moment, she put that aside. She happily played with Missyn, took photos together, and posted them on Instagram. By evening, Missyn still wanted to ride the Ferris wheel. Chris, known for loving his sister, still didn't agree. I also tried to persuade her. Missyn hadn't run far before she fell to the ground, her mouth bleeding profusely. Chris panicked and told Chelsea to disable the card's power immediately. He picked up Missyn and rushed to the hospital. Since she was a child, she had been fighting illness. Chris only had Missyn as his sole family, so he always loved and doted on her as much as he could. Chelsea and I also ran to the hospital. Seeing that Chris couldn't calm down, Chelsea used her card to bind his hand to hers. It wasn't until late at night that she disabled the card's power after Chris had calmed down. The doctor informed him of Missyn's serious condition. With this illness, no hospital would discharge her. She must have sneaked out. Chris only heard good things about himself from his sister. Even he didn't expect this. In the hospital room, Missyn talked with me and Chelsea. The siblings, like me, were both orphans, but she was luckier because she had a brother who loved her unconditionally. Chris entered the room, said a few words to his sister, and then all three went out. Chris always pretended he was fine, but Chelsea could see he was lying. This area was only for seriously ill patients. The truth was, Chris was not fine at all. After talking for a while, Chelsea promised him that she would return her card until she no longer needed to search for her destiny. That persistent nightmare continued to haunt my mind. Knights in armor and a large fire engulfed everything around me when I was still a boy. I tried to escape the burning castle in the sea of fire. A knight in armor chased after me, raising his sword, and then I woke up, having fallen asleep on the bus. I had taken leave from Pinnacle to visit the place where I grew up. A familiar customer named Apple came to the store, but didn't see me to ask about what he had seen that day. The day Chris and I held hands in the park, Apple wanted to ask, but only Chris came out to serve him. For some unknown reason, Apple was extremely prejudiced against Chris and always treated him very rudely, only preferring me to serve him. Apple asked Chris about what happened between us that day. Of course, he couldn't tell anyone the truth. Chris said they only had a senior-junior relationship. As soon as he finished speaking, Apple ran straight out, saying he disliked Chris being with me intensely. The bus also stopped in front of the orphanage. I thoughtfully carried a bouquet of flowers. As soon as I entered the gate, I saw a group of children playing outside. There were some new faces I had never seen. The situation was quite tense, so Lindsay had to stop the children. The boy Sam took his book, the one I had picked up earlier, and ran away. I stood outside witnessing everything before going in to greet Lindsay. The two talked for a while about Sam, and then I suddenly remembered it was Lindsay's birthday today and gave him flowers. At Ban's house, there was also someone missing from the party, Bobby, the guy the first had beaten half to death at the casino. After that incident, Ban lost faith in Bobby. His disappearance made Ban think that Bobby had failed at something again. Although it was called a party, he was actually eating alone and muttering, while the others hadn't even touched their utensils. They just sat there listening to him ramble on about a bunch of principles, saying they were a family. Although he had become a powerful mafia boss, Ban was still not satisfied. He wanted to go further, far enough to take the organization's name. They named themselves after a country, but the dream was just a dream. I heard about Sam, a boy who had just been brought here because his parents had passed away. I brought a flower to give to the boy. The boy just lay there reading a book, not caring about anything I said. And even when he answered, it was very polite. At 7 years old, I lost all memories of my family and was brought to the orphanage. All I could know was from Lindsay, who said my family had burned down and no one survived. The only thing that followed me from childhood to adulthood was that Two of Spades card. Lindsay had also warned me carefully that no matter what happened, I should not lose this card. And until now, that card is still with me. I remember every warm gesture from Lindsay. He loved me like his own younger brother, taught me many things, making me feel that my unfortunate life had begun to have colors. I considered this place family, and now so does Sam, who initially felt very alienated, seemingly unable to accept this situation, but later we will come to consider it family. Lindsay is the father, and all the children consider each other siblings. And even though Sam was focused on reading, he was still listening to me. The boy, of course, could not yet accept these words from me, only denying that his parents had passed away, meaning he no longer had a family, and there were no siblings here either. It was only when I showed Sam under the bed, where the boy had a secret compartment to hide things, that it aroused his interest. In the evening, everyone at the orphanage gathered to celebrate Lindsay's birthday. Gifts were piled high on the table. I appeared last, giving Lindsay a new apron after a year of wearing the old one. His eyes were full of sadness as he looked at the apron in my hand. This was the money I had earned myself. Both went into the kitchen to take the roasted chicken out of the oven. Taking this opportunity, Lindsay also had a few words he wanted to say to me. I even showed off the balance in my bank account. I promised Lindsay that I would buy this place back and make life better for the children. Seeing that I hadn't worked long, but already had a significant amount of money, made Lindsay very suspicious that I had risked my life doing dangerous things to earn it. He also did not want to use the money I had obtained by putting myself in danger. Both went outside and Lindsay held the cake in his hand, listening to the children he had cared for sing happy birthday. I seemed unhappy after the conversation in the kitchen. Before everyone finished singing, an uninvited dangerous person arrived. Bobby, the vengeful guy, had found his way here. Lindsay thought he was my colleague and came to exchange a few greetings. Bobby activated his card immediately. Lindsay still wanted to shake his hand. At this moment, anything Bobby touched would turn into marbles. Fortunately, Lindsay managed to pull his hand back in time. I quickly activated my card. The battle took place right here. Lindsay scattered the children, while everything was still under control. Bobby also seemed unwilling to harm the children. He only targeted me and shot marbles at me. Indeed, Bobby came here because he wanted to settle the score from that day at the casino. He resented me for ruining his image in the eyes of his boss Ban, making him no longer respected as before. He had to lie while being looked down upon by everyone around him. For an arrogant person like Bobby, life during this period was not easy at all. It was extremely humiliating. The wound I inflicted on his shoulder that day still ached, confident that his card would defeat the two of spades, the weakest card in the food chain I possessed. This time, Bobby was smarter, using a psychological tactic by setting the orphanage on fire, and whether unintentionally or intentionally, he touched my childhood wound. I quickly ran out to find Sam when the boy went into the room to get that book. I gave the boy a handkerchief to cover his nose and escape from here. Bobby also pursued them fiercely. By now, the fire was getting bigger, making it difficult to escape. They could only go to the roof. Soon after, Bobby also appeared below. The children had prepared a cloth for them to jump down safely. But I didn't go down. I encouraged Sam to trust his family and jump. While I stayed to fight this guy to the end, I carried with me the ideals Lindsay once taught. One of them is that the weak, when cornered, will fight with their lives. Now I am applying that teaching to Bobby. Although I possessed the weakest card among the remaining ones, I still fought with all my advantages. Down here, Lindsay had called the police, or an ambulance or something. I am not immortal like Chris. I don't have the ability to regenerate wounds on my body. Therefore, every battle is a life or death situation. You can see that my will cannot be underestimated. The number of attacks on Bobby was quite significant compared to what someone with a two of spades could do. What was surprising was that he had a total of 3 cards, many times stronger than me. The issue was no longer about winning or losing. It was about the boundary between life and death. Bobby could not be burned even when kicked into the fire and shot through the arm, but he could also heal his wound. At this point, Bobby's face was no longer recognizable. His whole body was black like charcoal with an indistinct face. Seeing him now reminded me of the nightmare of the night in the fire that I dreamt every night. Of course, this was entirely within Bobby's calculations while I collapsed as the nightmare invaded my reason. Unable to resist Bobby, a miracle appeared. Something shot at him, completely dissolving his body in a sea of fire. Far away in the city, a mysterious man had fired that missile to save him. The entire city was in chaos due to a bomb attack targeting 3 princes of this country, which occurred right in the center of the capital. Currently, the tense situation has not yet subsided. Fire trucks and ambulances have been urgently dispatched to the scene. 4 members of High Card were also present immediately. Although the terrorist attack was not related to their mission because it involved cardholders, it was still within the organization's purview. Meanwhile, 2 bodyguards were escorting Prince Danny into a car. The black-haired woman from Ban's organization got into the car with the prince. Before he could react, all 3 people in the car were sent to the afterlife. Chris ran for a while and discovered 2 suspicious individuals. Alex used his card to make rocks grow from the ground, then disappeared completely. Although Chris was not injured, he lost track of them. News of the terrorist attack quickly spread everywhere. The media reported the latest on the incident. Prince Danny, who was to be crowned in 3 months, died that day, and the perpetrators have not yet been found. Everything was still very chaotic when the prince's body was brought back to the palace next to the king. At this moment, the king turned and left, instructing Theodore not to let the cards be exposed to the public. As soon as the king left, Ban appeared. The 2 exchanged sharp words for a long time. Then, Theodore went out and told his subordinates to urgently summon Highcard. Chris had just left the hospital after visiting his sister when he received a call from Pinocchio. Bernard assigned him the task of summoning all Highcard members, including me. For the past 2 weeks, Bernard had not been able to call me anymore. He knew it was because what had happened at Sunfield had quickly demoralized me. Chris received an order that everyone in Highcard must be present at Pinnacle. Only I was absent. Theodore had assigned the task of immediately retrieving any cards currently in use. The current situation is extremely urgent. Bernard assigned them to proceed with the plan. As usual, Chris would go with me, but this time it seemed more difficult because I had just experienced psychological trauma. Bernard still believed that Chris could uplift my spirits because they were best friends. After receiving the assignment, Chris went to Sunfield, which had become a pile of rubble after that day's events. He continued to my dwelling. After days of self-isolation, I was still not doing better. I ate canned food to get by with dark circles under my eyes like a panda. It seemed I hadn't slept for days. I got out of bed, briefly washed my face, then collapsed on the floor, remembering the first time I entered the orphanage, remembering Lindsay and his teachings. He would be happier if I didn't come to Sunfield anymore. At this moment, Chris arrived. He stood outside, knocking on the door. Of course, in my current condition, I would never open the door to guests. Chris could only sit outside and talk to me, informing me that the team was on a mission, but I didn't want to participate anymore. My goal was money. But now that the house was gone, what good was money? Chris stayed and said a few words, which gave me a different perspective, and I stopped blaming myself. After speaking, Chris quickly left for the last train of the day. I opened the door but saw no one. Only a chocolate candy that Chris had left behind. I ran for a while and caught up with Chris, who was about to board the train. Both were in the carriage. While Chris was having a meal, I read the profiles of the card owners. Although I had decided to come here, I was still bothered by Lindsay's words. Chris said that adults are very complex, and at some point, when I am mature enough in life, I will naturally understand the meaning of Lindsay's words. A moment later, the train stopped at the station. As soon as the doors opened, they met Jasper. He possessed a metal control card, something that seemed harmless to Chris because he was immortal. Jasper's teammates had ambushed ahead of the train, just a short distance away. When they reached the bridge, they would send everyone to eternity. But Chris remained calm about this. Initially, the passengers on this train were not related to him, and even when Jasper threatened to kill me, Chris showed no concern. I, of course, didn't believe this was true, but I was still very confused. Chris's calm demeanor successfully shifted his fear to Jasper. Furthermore, if he wanted to destroy this train as a threat, wouldn't he also be affected? Jasper listened to Chris and realized he was in a dangerous situation. He had unintentionally become a sacrificial lamb. But Jasper still didn't want to give up. When they reached the bridge section, he used his power to blow off the roof of the train car. Alex, who was above, also used his card to make rocks and soil fall from the hill, blocking the train tracks. At this moment, Chris kicked me into the sea just as he activated his card. Jasper could no longer boast. He begged Chris in this dangerous situation. Chris threw him into the sea, but Jasper fortunately clung to the side of the train. He panicked and quickly acted to extend the train tracks up the rocky slope, successfully stopping the train safely. Chris intended to deal with Alex, but was restrained by Jasper's chains. Meanwhile, I drifted ashore unconscious. A passing woman happened to see me lying there. The next day, I woke up in a room and saw a strange woman. She said she had rescued me from the beach that day. I remained silent, but her familiar face reminded me of Ya, someone on the list of people whose cards needed to be retrieved, with identical, unmistakable features. I was worried about my card, but given my current physical condition, even moving and speaking became difficult. An experienced person like Ya would know, with just a glance, that I was from High Card. On the other side, everyone already knew about the two of us, and this mission still needed one more card to be complete. Looking at the train accident, Bernard guessed that both must have encountered other card owners. The inability to contact my team made everyone certain that they were in danger. Vijay and Wendy really wanted to go rescue the two, but under Theodore's orders, it was not allowed. Leo was their commander, but he still had to respect the rules set by the chairman, so the other two had to fend for themselves. I had also recovered at least enough to talk. I wanted to know what happened on the train yesterday. The TV was broadcasting news about the incident that day. Currently, the cause is still under investigation. I remembered Chris and wanted to find him. But in my current physical condition, I still couldn't get out of bed, let alone rescue anyone. As for Chris, he had been captured by Jasper and Alex. They tied him up high and used all sorts of punishments, wanting to find his card. But after a thorough search, they found nothing, which made Jasper even more furious. Perhaps it was because there was no card nearby. The wounds on Chris's body now couldn't heal. This meant he felt pain as normal. If a bullet shattered his skull now, he might die. Chris remained calm and didn't reveal a word about the card's whereabouts, even though Jasper hit him with an iron bar, while Alex searched for my whereabouts because he wanted to gain favor with the boss. Even if it was the most useless card in the food chain, he still had to get it at all costs. My place was much more peaceful because I was lucky enough to meet good people and had my wounds treated in time, and Ya cooked food to nourish me for a speedy recovery. I myself felt that she was treating me too well, which made me temporarily disbelieve it. For no reason at all, Ya just said that she was tired of seeing dead bodies in front of her. I refused to eat and spent the whole day sitting idly on the bed. Ya knew I wanted to save Chris, and these two seemingly unrelated people had an unexpected connection. Seeing my curiosity, Ya opened up and told me her story. This story began 25 years ago when she was a young woman dedicating her youth to High Card. This fighting made her feel like a real hero, and heroes had to face villains. This brought her no small amount of danger as the battles continued, until Ya heard that her teammates had sacrificed themselves. Theodore was directly involved in the battle, and he showed no emotion when witnessing this. Things continued afterwards, but deep down, she still carried this burden. She couldn't concentrate and became curious about where she was working. Then something happened. Terrorists bombed a shopping mall, and among the victims was a boy, Taylor's son, who was also a member of High Card. That boy was Chris. He was in critical condition. Any delay could affect his life. Taylor currently held 4 cards. If he used them, he could save Chris. But Theodore, who was present at the time, did not allow it. By the king's order, they could not use the power of the cards for personal matters. Although Taylor pleaded, he could not change Theodore's rules, and he ordered Ya to confiscate Taylor's cards. However, he did not give up. With no other choice, Theodore drew his gun and aimed it at Chris. Ya did not obey him. She restrained Theodore, helping Taylor in time to use the 4 cards to save Chris, but he paid for it with his own life. After that incident, Ya also resigned. She wandered across the country, eventually settling in a peaceful place with green trees and clear waters. She coincidentally met Robbie, and both enjoyed their old age together until this point. After a few days of recovery, I finally felt better. Although there were still some lingering effects, they were not significant. I prepared to set off to save Chris. Ya volunteered to give me her card, but first, she wanted to ask if I would be in a similar situation as when she saved Chris. What would I choose? I thought for a moment, then firmly answered that I would try my best. Ya smiled at the answer and handed me her card. As we stepped out of the house, we met Alex, who had found his way here. I threw the card to Ya so we could fight together. With the power to attract nearby objects at will, she had a spectacular battle with Alex. I, observing from outside, couldn't help but exclaim, "Amazing!" As I stepped in, Alex used the power of rocks, causing several boulders to rise around to block the path. This time, even with wings, it would be difficult to fly out. Meanwhile, Ya was still fighting Alex. She got stuck and fell into a pit. Robbie stood up to protect her as Alex ran past. At this moment, a car arrived. Chris stepped out of the car and kicked Alex into the pit. I took the opportunity to shoot him in the thigh. Seizing this chance, Ya moved a windmill to crush Alex, killing him on the spot. I turned to ask about the wounds on Chris's body, but he didn't answer. Before coming here, he had beaten Jasper to a pulp. He was contemplating a few things. Looking at the card in his hand without using it, he seemed very different from usual today. I happily ran to him, but he showed no emotion. If it were normal, he would have started teasing me by now. What seemed like a happy reunion unexpectedly turned into me taking a bullet straight to the left chest from Chris. Chris mumbled a few apologies, saying he didn't want me to know about his situation. Yeah, witnessing this scene, didn't have time to react before seeing me fall into a pool of blood, while Chris coldly turned and walked away without looking back. After the incident at Ya's house, Chris drove all night, returning to the city. After today, his mood became much gloomier than usual. This was largely because his inner thoughts still lingered on past events, which continued to haunt him incessantly. Even the cars passing on the road reminded him of his small family and his father from before. Looking back a few years, the family of 3 had gone to an amusement park together. In his memories, Taylor was a very cheerful and child-loving person. Even Miss Sen, born with a frail body, was much healthier when he was around than now. Although the brothers' mother died young, the 3 of them were still happy together because they had a wonderful father who loved them. But Taylor was still a man. Without a woman's presence in the house, he had to cook by himself. Of course, he was a bit clumsy, and the bread always smelled burnt. The 3 of them often played cards together, and that's when Chris smiled, genuinely, not worrying as much as he does now. Everything was still very happy, until one day, when all 3 went out to play at a shopping mall. Chris was right in the bombed area. He was immediately taken to the hospital in critical condition. His whole body was covered in wounds. It was that day's event that made Taylor sacrifice himself as a father to save his son. When Chris woke up in the hospital, he saw his father lying unconscious on the floor with 4 playing cards next to him. Taylor left his 2 children to rely on each other to survive. It was also for this reason that Chris became a hypocrite. With his handsome appearance and skillful eloquence, he easily won the hearts of young girls and always had a smile plastered on his face. Chris hid his true self this way. The place to return to and the person he wanted to protect made it take him a long time to find his true self in me. I was still very childish and smiled innocently. Chris still remembered everything he and I went through during that time. It was also for this reason that he couldn't tell me what he wanted to do. I also returned to Pinochet, and I am still alive. The truth is that Chris aimed directly at the cards in my pocket when he shot. As soon as I woke up, Leo grabbed my shirt and asked about Chris, but I didn't understand what was happening. Leo told me that Chris had taken some cards and disappeared, had been fired by Theodore, and a warrant had been issued for his arrest. It was then that I looked at the hole in my shirt. Considering Chris's ability, if he wanted to kill me, it wouldn't be difficult. He surely intended to aim at the card pocket. I wanted to find Chris to clarify everything, but Highcard was still on duty. Besides, because I was close to Chris, the president decided to temporarily confiscate my cards, and he also sent someone to investigate Chris's background. As for Ban, the organization seemed to be planning some grand conspiracy. He had gathered his subordinates, equipped with bulletproof vests and weapons. After a night, Chris also arrived in the city. He came to find Chelsea to retrieve the items he had sent her earlier. Chelsea knew for sure something was wrong because the police had come to the bar to ask about his whereabouts, but Chris just said it was because he was famous. Although, who would believe that? Chelsea intended to use her old trick again, but Chris played a rogue trick by kissing her to silence her. The result was a slap in the face. Inside the package were 4 playing cards, a gun, and Chris's ID. Apparently, he had prepared for this earlier. After checking everything, he turned away. Just a few steps later, he met Chelsea's police squad. This time, Chris didn't use the power of the cards but only a gun. But in just a moment, the police team was completely dealt with. Chelsea had already dragged Chelsea away and fled a long time ago. Then Chris quickly drove away. After some time since the incident at Sunfield, Lindsay came to visit the store where I worked. He handed me a handwritten letter, the general content of which was from someone who had donated a sum large enough for Lindsay to rebuild the orphanage for the children. It is noteworthy that the last line stated that it was sent by my master. No one understood who this person was except me. Lindsay showed me the check, but what interested me was the line below with the sender's name, Chris Redgrave. The mention of the orphanage made me blame myself again for my work. I also recalled Lindsay's words and sadly shook my head when he saw me in this state. In fact, he wanted me to think more broadly, not always assuming I only had one family. The children at Sunfield will eventually leave and have another place called a second family. Lindsay was happy to see the children he once raised now grown up and having a place where they belonged. Hearing his teachings, I suddenly remembered what Chris had told me. Lindsay told me that it was similar and this could also be my family. The two words, family, made me recall a few things related to Chris. Putting it all together, I also knew what Chris was about to do. I rushed to the hospital where Misson was being treated. At this moment, Ban's subordinates had infiltrated the foreign palace. Outside, several police officers had been taken down. When I arrived at the ward, I no longer saw anyone, only a piece of paper with a phone number and the words, "Call me." I took out my phone and immediately called Chris. He had been driving with Misson for a while, and he had prepared for today's event by quietly taking the cards. In fact, on the cruise, Chris had already prepared another fake card in his pocket. The stolen card was also fake, and he kept the real one. Even pushing me into the sea and shooting me when I knew too much was within Chris's calculations. All for the 4 cards in his hand. I reminded him that using 4 cards would lead to something terrible. After all they had been through, how could Chris not know? He did not answer, but calmly faced me and exchanged a few words. I repeated to him what Lindsay had taught me. Just a few short words made Chris realize, but he still didn't want to give up the chance to save his sister. I was about to chase after Chris when a sniper entered the room, aimed the scope directly at Chris's head in the car below, and pulled the trigger. Before that, Chris had awakened himself and used his card again, so his immortality was activated. Even if his skull was broken many times, he would not die. Another important piece of news was that the sniper came here to inform me that by obstructing Lord Theodore's orders, and this being the second time he repeated this, he was also fired. Ban's subordinates had attacked the palace. Hired was still there to fight them. They still had to fight, while being very worried about my and Chris's situation. But his father stopped Hired from rushing to help them. They had to deal with the palace intruders first. I grabbed Owen and questioned him, even though he was no longer a member of Highcard. I still had to stop Chris's foolish actions. As soon as I opened the door, 2 bodyguards entered and hit me on the head, causing me to temporarily lose consciousness. As for Chris, he was still driving to the place he had promised to take Misson, but halfway there, he encountered a police roadblock. Chelsea stopped the car at the hospital and accidentally saw 2 bodyguards carrying me, unconscious. Chelsea used her authority as a police officer, wanting to take me for questioning on some matters. Initially, the black bodyguard tried to pull out his gun, but the person next to him stopped him to talk properly. They also respected the police, so they didn't argue to the end. So at this moment, I fell down for Chelsea to catch, and then quickly fled, even borrowing her car. He didn't expect Chelsea to be in the car too, so both of them went to find Chris. Chelsea also took the bodyguard's car to chase after them. Facing this police team, Chris also had to get out of the car and show his ID for them to check. A police officer recognized him by his biker jacket as the person being sought. At this moment, Ban appeared. He used his power to cut off the piece of land the police were on. Ban said he liked the way Chris operated, even though he didn't know why Chris did it. Currently, he is in opposition to the whole world. He doesn't care about the king or the crown, only supporting Ban to do whatever he wants. It should be known that Clone Kid is Pinocle's opponent, so it's unclear why he helped him at this time, but he surely has some ulterior motive. After speaking, he left, until the police came to continue the chase. The gap on the road created at this time helped Chris escape successfully. He continued driving with Misson. He himself didn't understand why a Ban would act like that, but Chris didn't care. He just wanted to be able to save Misson. At this moment, I told Chelsea about what had happened with Chris and my own predictions. Chris might have decided to save Misson with the 4 cards and his own life. At all costs, I had to stop this. Misson also didn't know where Chris intended to go. She just remembered that he said he had an appointment. These words made me recall the day when all of us went out, and Misson wanted to go on the Ferris wheel. She wanted to reminisce about the memory of their father many years ago. He had also taken her there, but Chris didn't allow it at the time. He promised to take her, but not them. Both were sure that Chris would take Misson to that Ferris wheel. At this moment, the car's touchscreen was hacked, and it was Bernard. He had heard everything and pointed to my collar to let me know that he had secretly placed a recording device in my jacket. They both talked for a while and learned that I would disregard the consequences to save Chris, which meant I would go against an entire nation because Pinnacle receives direct orders from the king. However, I still wanted to do it because I was Chris's friend when I had no one else. Chris was the one who came and saved me. They drove a long way and encountered the dark-lipped woman. She made their car fly to the other side. Fortunately, both were safe, though slightly injured. She wanted to take the 5 of Hearts card from Chris, so she attacked me. Chelsea used her card to pull me away and successfully saved me from the dangerous situation. When jumping over the bridge, she was injured by that woman so as not to become a burden to me. Chelsea will stay here and tell me to continue chasing Chris. At Leo's place, the battle was still ongoing. He used a specialized device to contact Bernard. While fighting, he heard that I was chasing Chris, which made him very happy. Leo quickly told his father that after everything here was resolved, he would pursue Chris, but Theodore still said no because he was too close to him. This could be a fatal weakness, and he instructed him to simply obey orders. Leo became even more determined to end the battle here. More than 4 barreled cannons had swept away all these people. Leo opened the VIP room door, but saw no one. At this moment, Theodore announced that the mission was complete. He called for High-Card to quickly gather, then pursue Chris and me. Chris had also taken Miss to the Ferris wheel. Meanwhile, I had to race against time while escaping the pursuit of this dark-lipped woman. At the most critical moment, Wendy's Love Bee appeared. A car drove up. It was Bernard, while Love Bee stayed to block the way with her. The two sides fought relentlessly, but Love Bee seemed to gain the upper hand with her wild personality and the swordsmanship of a true samurai. Greg Young was also present, shooting the dark-lipped woman several times and firing another shot at Love Bee to curb her aggressive nature. The park area where Chris was located was illuminated. He had taken Miss into the Ferris wheel. Chris knew he was selfish, but he would also go to Taylor. The first thing the girl saw after waking up was Chris's cold, lifeless body, just as he had been. He activated 4 cards, and then light shone throughout the city. Bernard, still on the road in his car, could also see that light. I felt even more urgent. Unfortunately, there were no shortcuts to get there in the city. Leo and VJ were also in close pursuit. He used his power in the way of the super rich, using cash from a truck to create a path through the city for me to shorten the distance to the Ferris wheel. After more than half the journey, Leo ran out of money and could not continue. At this moment, Bernard handed me his card and reminded me of High-Card's golden rule, not to fear meeting God. The car plunged into the river. I jumped out of it, activating my card in the process, and fired a brass bullet directly at the cards Chris was activating. The 2 of spades might be ordinary, but my agility and skill were anything but. This intervention successfully saved both brothers' lives. Chris survived partly due to his immortality and my swift and decisive action. This single display successfully saved the entire stalemate. After that, things started to look up. The Klondike family's coup plot was exposed, and the government lifted martial law. The city also returned to its usual peace. Missandei had not fully recovered, but her health was much better than before. As for the Klondike side, there was no movement for the time being. Bernard reported all this back to Theodore. Chris's punishment was to become my subordinate because while he was hospitalized, I was rehired as an official employee after quite some turmoil, having only been an apprentice until then.